There are a lot of parallels here, as we keep hearing, to 1968. Is the party capable of avoiding them?
Well, the problem with the comparison to 1968 is most of the problems came from the outside, whether it was the North Vietnamese, Russians, Chinese defeating the U.S. More or less in the Tet Offensive, or in the case of the convention, having people who wanted to demonstrate the Vietnam War number in the thousands and thousands and simply converge upon the convention. It's the first convention that smelled like tear gas. I hope it doesn't get to that point this year, but it might. It's possible. We're living in a violent era, and politics has been feeding the violence.
Well, certainly we've been talking a lot about political violence in just the last 10 days, because it was only that long ago that we witnessed the attempted assassination on Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, obviously a critical swing state. We've been thinking a lot, Larry, about what went down in not just Pennsylvania, but Milwaukee the last week, considering in the immediate aftermath of that assassination attempt, Donald Trump selected J.D. Vance to be his vice presidential nominee. If we assume that Kamala Harris is going to be the top of the ticket, who would you guess would be joining her on it? What would best serve the map for the Democrats?
Well, you know, I've been around a long time, and I have learned never to guess who these nominees will pick for their VP candidate, because they all want to do something cutesy. And sometimes it falls really flat, you know, Sarah Palin, that kind of thing. I know who she should pick. I'm old-fashioned. I think that you want to have a balanced ticket. So you pick somebody who's not like you, but can appeal to other segments of the party and the population. And this is all about electoral votes. You know, you can talk about anything you want to, but you win when you get 270 electoral votes. So you pick somebody who can win electoral votes. To me, that means Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, that's 19 electoral votes, or Governor Cooper of North Carolina, that's 16 electoral votes, or Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, that's 11 electoral votes, plus he's already known nationally because of his astronaut career. And there are some others that fit my definition, but those three occur to me immediately.
We actually heard from Shapiro a bit earlier today. Let's listen to what he said and have you respond, Larry. Maybe we don't have that quite ready yet. But we'll continue our conversation with that in mind, Larry. Let me ask you about the timeline when it comes to a running mate. Is it worth it for Kamala Harris to do what Donald Trump did, essentially, and drag this out to Chicago to create the anticipation and interest around a pick?
Well, you could make an argument for that. I think a better argument is after a few days or a week, at most 2 weeks, doing your search, then you go ahead and announce the winner of that search. Don't let it get out of hand. Don't let potential nominees for vice president either develop because of their efforts or develop because of certain factions' efforts. A group of people who will inevitably, since this is Democrats, say, it's my nominee, it's my way or the highway. You want to avoid that. Get people used to the ticket before you actually go into the convention. Make those days count, because Kamala Harris, even though she's been vice president, she's not well defined. People don't follow what a vice president is doing. And so she needs to define herself, and her selection as vice president is going to help define her in a major way.
Larry, I want to return to the conversation we were having around that vice presidential selection being related to the map and who can bring electoral votes. We've been talking a lot about in recent weeks whether we need to consider a wider list, a longer list of swing states like Virginia this election cycle. We actually heard from the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, earlier today on Bloomberg speaking about that, and this is what he had to say.
I think that Virginia is still in play. Right. And what we're seeing, of course, is Virginians are stating that they want strong leadership, not weak leadership. Yep. They know that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden led this administration together, and that track record is her track record. And I think that Americans are reflecting the same sentiment. Yep. They're ready for strength in the White House, not weakness.
Larry, you're, of course, also speaking to us as a Virginian. Does the lack of President Biden at the top of the ticket take Virginia back off the map?
I wouldn't go that far. And of course, Governor Youngkin was giving the Republican talking points. But I do think it is possible Virginia will be competitive, even though Kamala Harris is the nominee. Though I would add, Hillary Clinton, who was a very controversial figure for many years, won Virginia by 5 points. And of course, Joe Biden won it by 10. But recent polls have had it essentially tied when you do the polling average. Any Democratic nominee who can't put Virginia away relatively quickly, that would be, in my mind, September, is going to have problems nationally. I mean, Virginia is now part of the Democratic base. It's not deeply blue, it's light blue, but there's almost no way for Democrats to win without it. Where are they going to get those 13 electoral votes from? I can't find a place. They're going to be lucky to get to 270.
Larry, I want to ask you about strategy here for the Trump campaign. We heard from Chris LaCivita, campaign manager, in an interview with Axios. He said the last thing we're worrying about is laughing Kamala. You can move the chairs on a sinking boat all you want. Doesn't change the result. Can the Trump campaign win if it does not change its approach now?
Well, they have to change their approach, and being insulting is not a good way to go. I lost count of the number of speakers at the Republican convention who mispronounced Kamala Harris's name on purpose. No one, there's no way that was an accident when you had, a dozen people doing it. I guess somebody sent out instructions. That is insulting. And people don't like that. There are a lot of people in this country who have names that aren't easily pronounceable. And they take offense from something like that, too. They're going to have to take her very seriously. For one thing, she's much younger and more vigorous than Biden. The age problem is gone. There are other problems. There are always problems with any candidate. But the Republicans have to do a lot better than that. I understand why they're frustrated. They had been planning and spending millions and millions of dollars preparing to run against Joe Biden. And now the nerve of him to step aside. Did you see where some senior Republican leaders, I think, including the Speaker of the House, want to sue Joe Biden to force him to continue running as the nominee? What does that tell you?